When people talk about breakthroughs, they often think of sudden events, something dramatic, unexpected, and almost magical. The truth is, breakthroughs rarely happen in isolation. They don't come out of nowhere. They are the culmination of long seasons of tension, resistance, and pressure. If you think about your own life, you may notice that the moments that later defined you, the times when you rose into something greater, were often preceded by periods when you felt stretched to your limit. And it's no accident. There's a principle that seems to govern both nature and human growth. The breaking point almost always comes right before the breakthrough. Consider the seed that is buried underground. It is surrounded by dirt pressed into darkness, stripped of comfort, and yet in that hidden struggle, something remarkable is happening. It is pushing, straining, breaking its own outer shell in order to release the life within. If we were to freeze that process in the middle, it would look like destruction, like something is being torn apart. But in reality, it's transformation. The breaking is not a signal of death, it's the beginning of growth. Human lives follow a similar arc. What feels like breaking down is often God's way of preparing you for breaking through. Psychology even gives us language for this. When people encounter sustained challenges, their nervous system goes into what's called an adaptive response. At first, stress feels like overload. It taxes you, it wears you out. But when stress is paired with meaning, with a sense of why it matters, the body and mind reorganize around resilience. Muscles strengthen through strain. The brain rewires through repeated effort. Faith deepens not in calm waters but in storms that require us to lean on something greater than ourselves. God in His wisdom allows us to feel that pressure not to crush us, but to stretch our capacity so that when the blessing comes, we are strong enough to hold it. Think about your own experiences. Maybe there was a season when you thought you couldn't go any further, when the financial weight was unbearable, when the relationship felt like it was falling apart, when the goal you were chasing seemed so distant that it mocked you, yet somehow you found a way to keep moving, to take the next small step. That persistence, that refusal to give up is where the breakthrough begins. You may not have realized it, but the moment you didn't quit was the moment you stepped into alignment with something far bigger than yourself. This principle shows up in every field. Athletes train their bodies to the edge of exhaustion, and only at that edge do they trigger adaptation. Musicians practice until their fingers ache, and in that discomfort, mastery is born. Scientists wrestle with problems for years, enduring frustration and false starts, until suddenly the solution appears. In all of these, the pressure isn't a punishment. It's a necessary stage in the process of becoming spiritually. The same is true. God often brings us to the edge of what feels unbearable because He knows that only there do we discover the depths of our faith, the strength of our character, and the courage that was hidden within us all along. There's a fascinating observation in neuroscience about how the brain responds to uncertainty. When the future is unclear and the outcome unknown, the brain interprets it as a threat. That's why periods of waiting, of not knowing what comes next, feel so exhausting. The mind is constantly scanning for danger, searching for answers, yet it's precisely in this space of uncertainty that faith becomes active. Faith is not needed when everything is predictable and easy. Faith is forged when you are pressed against the limits of what you can control. God uses that uncertainty to invite you into trust, into surrender, into realizing that the breakthrough isn't about you proving yourself, it's about you learning to rely on Him. And this is where many people stumble. The temptation at the breaking point is to quit, to interpret pressure as failure. But what if the pain you feel right now is not evidence of defeat, but evidence that you are closer than you realize to something extraordinary? Every contraction before birth looks violent, painful, and overwhelming, but it is ushering in new life. Every dark night before dawn feels endless, but it is carrying within it the certainty of light. The breaking point is not the end, it is the edge of your new beginning. Let's take a step back and think philosophically about why this happens. Growth, by definition, requires leaving behind a former state. To evolve means to shed something of the old in order to embrace the new, but shedding is uncomfortable. It feels like loss, it feels like instability. And yet, without that loss, without that moment of breaking, there is no room for transformation. The philosopher Kierkegaard once wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. It is what we feel when we stand on the edge of possibility. That dizziness, that sense of being stretched to the breaking point, is not a flaw. It is a signal that something is opening up, that you are being called to step into a wider space. On a more practical level, the breaking point teaches you perspective. When you are in the middle of pressure, you begin to see what truly matters. Distractions fall away. What used to consume your time and attention suddenly looks trivial compared to the larger challenge. In this way, God uses the breaking point to clarify your vision. He strips away what is unnecessary, so you can focus on the essential, and when the breakthrough comes, you are not only blessed with the outcome, but with a sharpened sense of purpose. But here's the challenge. How do you hold on when everything in you wants to let go? The answer lies in reframing the way you interpret pressure. If you see it as punishment, you'll run from it. If you see it as preparation, you'll lean into it. The stories of scripture and history are filled with men and women who endured the breaking point and emerged stronger. Joseph in the prison before the palace, David in the wilderness before the throne, even Jesus in Gethsemane before the resurrection. Each story echoes the same rhythm: pressure, breaking, breakthrough, and if God used that rhythm for them, He will use it for you. So when you feel yourself at the edge, when you feel stretched beyond what you can handle, take a breath and recognize the pattern. Remind yourself that what feels like the end might actually be the prelude to your greatest beginning. The breaking point is not meant to destroy you, it is meant to reveal you. There is a version of you on the other side of this moment that is stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your calling. That version cannot be born without the struggle you are in now. This is why giving up is so tragic. To walk away at the breaking point is to forfeit the very breakthrough that was around the corner. It is like stopping the race one step before the finish line or abandoning the seed just before it sprouts. You may not see the progress beneath the surface, but it is happening. Every act of resilience, every small choice to keep believing, every refusal to surrender is compounding toward that tipping point where everything shifts. And so, if you are listening to this and you feel tired, if you feel like you've been pressed from every side, if you feel like you're standing at the edge of your limits, I want you to know this: you are closer than you think. The pressure you feel is not random. It's a signal that something is being formed in you and for you. God has not abandoned you. He is refining you. The breaking point is not the place where your story ends. It is the place where your story turns. So hold on. Stay faithful. Keep moving. Because the very moment you feel like you cannot take another step might be the moment God has been preparing to release the blessing you've been waiting for. The breaking point is never the end. It is the sign that the breakthrough is near. We often imagine blessings as events that simply drop into our lives, sudden gifts that arrive without warning. And while sometimes that does happen, more often than not, the biggest wins, the breakthroughs we've been waiting for, require preparation. They don't just land on us fully formed, they come when we have become the kind of person who can hold them, sustain them, and multiply them. This is the often overlooked truth about divine blessings. They aren't only about what you receive, but about who you become in the process of receiving them. Preparation is what aligns you with the promise. Think about it in terms of responsibility. If someone handed you the keys to a race car without first teaching you how to drive, it wouldn't be a gift, it would be a danger. The blessing would crush you instead of elevating you. In the same way, God does not give us victories we are not yet ready to handle. He prepares us first, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but always with purpose. The waiting, the discipline, the unseen labor, those aren't delays. They are the scaffolding being built to hold the weight of what is coming. In psychology, there's a concept called delayed gratification. It's the ability to resist an immediate reward for the sake of a greater one later. Studies show that people who develop this skill, who learn how to wait, how to prepare, end up with better health, stronger relationships, and greater success. What's interesting is that this principle mirrors a spiritual reality. The promise comes to those who are willing to endure the process. Preparation is not wasted time. It's the very thing that expands your capacity to receive. When we zoom out and look at history, we see this pattern again and again. Every person who carried something significant, whether in faith, science, leadership, or art, went through a season of preparation. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison before leading a nation into freedom. Those years, which looked like delay or punishment, were in fact shaping his patience, humility, and clarity of vision. In Scripture, we see the same with Joseph, who endured betrayal, slavery, and prison before stepping into the role of saving nations from famine. Without that preparation, the promise would have collapsed under the weight of immaturity. It's important to realize that preparation is rarely glamorous. It often feels like obscurity, like being hidden. And in a world that glorifies speed and visibility, this can feel unbearable. But think of how nature works. The tallest trees spend years putting down roots before they ever stretch toward the sky. If you judge their progress only by what you see above the ground, you'd miss the unseen foundation being formed below. In the same way, your unseen disciplines, your private battles, your moments of integrity when nobody is watching, all of these are roots. They are preparing you to withstand the winds when the blessing comes. Neuroscience even supports this. The brain develops pathways through repetition. Skills are not built in moments of inspiration, but in consistent practice. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're literally rewiring your brain to sustain greater levels of focus and resilience. And this neurological preparation mirrors the spiritual principle. Your brain, your body, your spirit, they are all aligning to carry the weight of what's ahead. That's why preparation matters. It ensures that the promise doesn't just visit your life temporarily, but becomes a permanent part of your destiny. There's another aspect to preparation that often goes unnoticed. It doesn't just change your ability, it changes your perspective. When you've gone through the process, you see the blessing differently. You value it more deeply because you know what it cost. Someone who has suffered through illness appreciates health in a way others cannot. Someone who has endured loneliness treasures connection with more reverence. Preparation refines your gratitude. Without it, the promise can be taken for granted, even squandered. This is why so many people who seem to receive sudden success fall apart. They had the gift, but not the preparation. We've all seen examples: athletes who get fame overnight and spiral, lottery winners who end up bankrupt, leaders who rise too quickly and collapse under the pressure. The promise came, but the foundation wasn't there. God is far too wise to set you up for that kind of collapse. So if you feel like your blessing is delayed, it may not be delayed at all. It may be that you are still in training, being equipped so that when the promise arrives, you can hold it without it breaking you. Philosophically, preparation speaks to a deeper truth about human existence. We are not merely defined by what we achieve, but by what we are becoming. The process of becoming ready is often more important than the arrival itself. Imagine if you could step instantly into your dream career, your ideal relationship, your highest goal, without the process of growth. It would feel thrilling at first, but you wouldn't be the person who could sustain it. The journey shapes you in ways the destination never can. Preparation is not a side note to the story, it is the story. On a practical level, preparation demands discipline. It means showing up when you don't feel like it, choosing consistency over comfort, and discipline, when repeated long enough, becomes character. Character is what ensures that the blessing isn't fleeting. It roots the promise in something enduring. And here's the key: discipline doesn't just make you stronger, it signals to God and to yourself that you are ready. Every act of discipline is like a declaration. I am preparing space for what's coming. The question then is not whether God is willing to bless you. He is. The question is whether you are willing to be prepared. Will you embrace the waiting, the stretching, the refining? Will you do the unseen work that nobody applauds? Will you trust that the silence is not abandonment but alignment? Because if you will, you position yourself not just to receive the promise but to live it fully. And this alignment isn't passive. It's not just sitting around waiting for something to happen. It's active, waiting. It's building, learning, growing, practicing faithfulness in the small things so you're ready for the big ones. Preparation is your participation in the promise. It is how you meet God halfway, showing that you trust Him enough to do your part while He does His. So when you find yourself in that season of waiting, instead of asking, why hasn't it happened yet? Ask, what is this season preparing me for? That shift in perspective changes everything. Suddenly the waiting becomes meaningful. The delay becomes training. The hidden work becomes holy ground. And when the promise arrives, and it will, you will not just step into it blindly. You will step into it with strength, clarity, and gratitude, knowing that you were shaped for this very moment. Preparation is alignment. It is the invisible bridge between where you are and where God is taking you. To resist it is to resist the very thing that makes the promise sustainable. To embrace it is to position yourself for a blessing that doesn't just touch your life, but ripples outward to others. And so if you are in that season right now where you feel overlooked or delayed, where the promise feels distant and the preparation feels endless, let me remind you, nothing is wasted. Every practice, every lesson, every trial, every unseen choice of integrity is weaving together a foundation that will one day hold the weight of your breakthrough. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. Because when God gives you a win, He wants it to last. And lasting victories are only possible when the person holding them has been refined enough to sustain them. That's why preparation matters. That's why it cannot be skipped. So lean into the process, don't despise it, don't rush it. Trust that the preparation is not separate from the promise, it is the promise in motion. And when the moment comes, when the breakthrough finally arrives, you will not just be surprised by it, you will be ready for it. Preparation is not waiting for the promise. Preparation is becoming the person who can live the promise.